Just like that, here we are, another week. Now, my hope and prayer is that hopefully since last week's video, you guys have been in prayer and asking God to reveal to you these truths, and you've been doing your own research, independent research, regarding not just IVF and surrogacy, but also some of these lies that I'm going to address in this video. The goal of this video is to not just bring up some of these lies that couples, husbands and wives, have bought into and believed about either not wanting to have kids or not wanting to have many kids, and hopefully also shattering these lies so that we don't keep believing this lie and we can start making some changes and course correcting before it's too late, to be quite frank. And I hope you are ready, that your heart is ready to have this conversation and to hear what some of these lies are, and that you're ready for them to be shattered. So, with that said, let's dive in. Okay, so for today's video, I have quite a few clips to show us today. I think this will help really reveal these excuses or lies that we kind of believe, and some of these clips will also kind of shatter some of these lies. So, first one, Jordan and Milena, they have a podcast. As for Me and My House is the name of their podcast. And they were interviewing this other couple. And this other couple also has a podcast called Now That We're a Family. Now, this other couple, Elisha and Katie, they have 5 kids. But Elisha, the husband, comes from a family of 10 kids. And Katie, his wife, comes from a family of 11 kids. And they were talking about this excuse that people tend to bring up. So I want to play this for you and then see how many of you actually have believed this lie. And then let's go from there.
So, question I wanted to ask you guys to that point is, how do you respond to reasons people might give you if you've come across, oh, well, is it because they're too expensive? Is it because, I'm not going to have as much me time? Is it, I don't want to bring kids into the world because this world is so evil and horrible and I don't want anyone else to experience this. And I'm sure you've heard all of those and then some, but how do you respond to people's, excuses or reasons for those not having children, in other words?
Now, some of you that saw that clip probably thinking to yourself, that's not really an excuse, Alex. That's a legit reason. I mean, look at the world around you. Look at how crazy things have gotten. You really want to subject kids to an environment like this? You really want to bring them up in an environment like this? Why would you want to do that? I'll address that. Hang on. But first, I want to address or talk to the people who are thinking, that just saw that and are like, that surely can't be a reason, right? That's not really an excuse that people give. Well, this next clip that I want to show you is from the Whoa, That's Good podcast by Sadie Robertson. She was talking to this lady, Devin Cordell. Her and her husband, they were, expecting kids and whatnot, but they were talking about this whole journey, having kids. And Devin's initial idea, her and her husband, they kind of had this thought. So check this out.
That's such a cool piece of advice, and I'm glad we started with that. And I think I saw somewhere that you said you were worried to have any kids at all, or maybe didn't even want to have kids. So talk a little bit about that shift in your heart from going to not wanting to have kids to now being pregnant with your second.
Yes. So it was in the heat of COVID 2020. And Hunter and I had been together for a long time. We were high school sweethearts, married right after high school. So we wanted time, I guess, for ourselves. And you think, well, you already had time, but it's so different.
Yeah.
And I think just being in the world, seeing everything, it was scary. I'm like, how do you raise kids in this world? And I know now looking back, it was really the enemy just putting that on me. And I got advice back then saying, if you take the light out of the world, there's not going to be any light. And so as a Christian, and I had to really pray on that because I knew it'd be my responsibility to raise a child in this world. And how the heck do you do that?
Now, that's just one clip of one couple that thought this way, thought bringing up kids in a world that's so dangerous and bad and evil was not really a wise decision. And Sadie, I think, does a good job of shattering this lie, this belief, this excuse. And I want to play this for you. She was reading from John 17, I believe, and she made some really, really good points. So check this out.
Okay, now I'm coming to you, he's talking to God, and I speak these things in the world so that they may have my joy completed in them. I have given them your word. The world hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I'm not praying that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is the truth. And I love that so much. And I thought about that with our kids, that Jesus is praying and he's saying, he's talking about the hatred in the world, the bad things in the world. I'm not of this world, all these different things. And he prays that his joy would be completed in us. He prays that we would know the truth, but he also says, I'm not praying that you take them out of the world, but that you protect them from the evil one as they're in the world. And then he goes on and he prays for us to know how much the Father loves us. He prays for us. He literally says, I pray for the generations to come, who are going to believe this word. And it's just like so amazing because it's a beautiful thing as a mom and as a dad to pray these things over your kids. You should be praying these things over your kid. It is scary to live in this world, but even Jesus is saying, as a son of God who was sent into a world that is evil, that was going to hate him, God as a father had to allow his son to go through that, trusting that what his son was going to accomplish in the world as the light of the world was actually going to give us the path of eternal life. And so in the same way, we're sent in the world to be a light of the world and to give people the good news of Christ and this good news that you can have eternal life. And I just love that Jesus has literally prayed for us, that we would have joy in the midst of the whole thing, that we would know the truth, that we would know the love of God, and that we would stay in it, even though the world's not going to understand us, even though there's going to be hard things, but that we would stay in it so that we would be that light. And so I just
Talk about shattering a lie or an excuse, whichever one you want to call it. But these people that tend to believe this lie about they don't want to have kids because of how bad the world is, I think what Sadie said in that clip was really great, and she did a great job. I don't really have to harp on that anymore. So if you have to go back and watch that and really mull it over and think about it, please do so. I encourage you to. But that leads me to this second lie that I think we tend to believe. And it's, this lie of this modern day feminism. I don't need a man. Or even if you do have a man, you have this whole contraception, right? So this birth control. So you can be on birth control. So that way you can decide when you want to have kids. Back in the day, there was no birth control. So you had kids if if you were intimate, if you were married and you just had kids. I mean, that's how it worked out. But now with birth control, you can opt to be on birth control and then not want to have kids. And then you can say, okay, I'm going to get off birth control now when I've decided that I've reached the peak of my career. So you can chase your career first and then you can put your family second. or your potential family second. And there's this clip I want to show you where they kind of talk about this whole idea and the birth rate in South Korea. Chris Williamson had Louise Perry on, and they were talking about this. So check this clip out.
I mean, there's a certain elegance to that, right? But we've lost that because of contraception. And now there are still groups, there are still cultures, there are still people who just love babies and will have loads of kids because they just get so much joy from babies, which is great. Like I'm one of those people. I would rather have loads of kids and earn less money. I've like made that rational decision. But for a lot of people, that's not an obvious choice. Some cultures are still channeling people into being more traditionalist, being more long-termist. But the mainstream culture absolutely isn't doing that. And the very likely consequence of that is that, I mean, like, I can't remember the numbers exactly, but South Korea, you'll know, has the lowest fertility rate in the world.
For every 100 South Koreans, there will be 4 great-grandchildren.
Right. Like, there's never been a plague that has knocked out that many people.
The 96% extinction rate over the next 100 years
Incredible.
of Koreans.
Yeah.
Remembering that we shut down the entire world for something that kills 1 to 2% of people.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
It's the most incredible evolutionary bottleneck that we're going through.
Now that's scary. That's scary. Those numbers that he brought up about the birth rate in South Korea. And some of you might be thinking, okay, but that's South Korea. What's America's birth rate? Well, I'm glad you asked, because I have this other clip from the Lila Rose podcast. And she had this lady on, Catherine Pakaluk, I believe is how you pronounce her last name. She wrote this book, and she had done this research. Her and her team had gone around the country interviewing these wives or mothers of these big families and kind of getting their outlook and whatnot. Now, Catherine herself, she's married to her husband, and her husband, his previous wife had died, and before she died, they had 6 kids together. So the husband already came with like 6 kids. And then when Catherine got married to him, she had 8 kids with him. So what, a total of 14 kids, I believe? That's a lot of kids. A lot of kids. But she was talking about the birth rate in the US. And I want to play for you this clip so that you can kind of get a perspective of what it's really looking like.
All right. So before we dive into all of that, there's so much there.
Yeah.
Give us the statistics
Yeah.
on what population really looks like
Right.
in the West and globally,
Yeah.
and why it's a concern.
Yeah. So the simple way to think about it is that about each woman has to have about 2 children in her lifetime for a population at large. So she replaces herself and her partner, and that creates a stable, non-growing, non-shrinking population. And anything less than 2 children is over another couple generations will lead to shrinking population. And so the statistics around in the United States and around the globe, we in the United States have about 1.6 children per woman. So that's pretty significantly below that kind of magic number of 2. And around the world, that is the general trend. In fact, we've been a little late to that party. So we were a little bit after some other countries, notably most of Europe, especially Western Europe, now Eastern Europe too. And Japan, we know Japan started its population shrinking already in 2008, I think. China started shrinking last year. South Korea has 0.7 children expected per woman. So very, very low birth rates and around the world. And it's really, there's no continent that isn't touched by this. So that means that within another couple of generations, we'll begin to see peak population in the whole world and population decline.
So why is the birth rate so low? I mean, if we think about that clip that I just played for you, she was saying that we need to have at least 2 for a society to just maintain, not to grow, not to shrink, just to maintain. Well, first of all, why would we just want to maintain? Why? We should be wanting to grow. A society should be wanting to get better. So why is it that this birth rate has gone down? Well, I think that leads me to this last lie that I'm going to bring up. and it's overpopulation. Overpopulation, the whole climate change stuff. There's too many people using too many resources. So I want to address this. And I think the best way to address this is to have Catherine explain that really it's not true. It's not true. This overpopulation idea is not true. So check this clip out.
Is there overpopulation? There isn't now overpopulation. There hasn't been overpopulation in terms of not enough resources. The people that have existed have contributed to prosperity. They haven't actually undermined prosperity. And that occurs, I mean, economists believe it occurs because people are not stomachs. They're also minds, right? So each person isn't just gobbling up resources. They're also consuming goods and services, and they're innovating and creating and contributing. And what we see is that basically people contribute more in their lifetime than they take away. And that's true on the individual level of a household and a family. That's this principle. But it also turns out to be true for countries and for nations. So that's the first point, is that the population growth we've had in the past hasn't been bad for us. It's been really good for us. And we could connect together, of course. You know, it's a little bit oversimplifying. If we thought about intellectual history, we can connect together these population bomb people like Paul Ehrlich. We can connect them together with Planned Parenthood, with the eugenics movement. I mean, kind of like they're just variations on a theme, right? They're playing the same tune. And the same tune is that either there's too many people simpliciter, that's Paul Ehrlich, or you're Margaret Sanger, and there's too many of the wrong people, right? And the solution is always get rid of the people, not kind of figure out how to solve the problem of like, maybe we need better water systems here. Maybe we.
So let's see here. What I've covered so far is the not wanting to have kids because of how bad the world is. Lie. Been shattered, hopefully. And contraception, so that you can chase your career and then put family whenever you feel like you've achieved success in the workforce. Lie. And finally, overpopulation. Also a lie. So I hope this has helped us to see exactly what we as a society and as couples have been believing, and we've been kind of following what society has told us. You can have a career and chase your career. Don't worry about kids. You can have kids later, one or two, that doesn't really matter. Just have one. It's more manageable that way. And then you have nowadays, society is trying to sterilize kids with this whole puberty blockers because you can pick your gender. So again, trying to stunt and prevent society from growing. Why? Why is society trying to do this to us? Trying to prevent us from having kids? Trying to make us believe all of these lies when we should be believing what God says and the command that He gave us in the Bible, which I brought up in last week's video, to be fruitful and multiply. So I hope this has helped shatter some of these lies that we've believed, and hopefully has made us more receptive to the idea of having kids and having many kids. So next week, we're going to dive even deeper, and we're going to address something that I also think is really pertinent and really crucial that I don't think a whole lot of us realize. So with that being said, stay tuned for next week. Pray about this video and what you heard in this video and what I brought up. Ask God to continue growing you in wisdom and showing you things that, teaching you things that you need to learn. And hopefully with that, we'll be even more prepared for next week's video. So until then, you guys stay safe. And as always, God bless.